I want to do a couple of segments. Segment number one is going to be me talking about past tokens, but I'm not going to go into all of them. I'm going to focus on one in this segment, and that's unfortunately Libero. You're like, why unfortunately? Because it's clear to me that people don't understand how I do the coverage, despite my every effort to explain how I do the coverage. I would argue that the vast majority of the listeners understand how my coverage works. I'm an investor. I cover it from an investor lens. I look for fundamentals. I'll call out where I think things suck, but ultimately I'm looking for it to perform the way they told me. If it's performing the way they told me, I'm less concerned about certain things being gaps. So when you hear me talk about, let's say, Bora, and I say, I love the project, I love everything about it, except the way that they steered everybody to Discord and the fact that they treated the marketing as a task rather than a strategy. These are common criticisms. You as an investor should share them because you see the price isn't moving in the direction you expect it based on the nature of the token. But if I look at Parabolic, who I love that project and I love its tokenomics, its price also isn't moving, but there's nothing wrong with it. They actively said, we are not going to promote this heavily. Our marketing is not active because we want a tangible product first. Great. My only downside, feedback for them is I shouldn't have had to go find that information. They should have had it on their site and they should have promoted and come ideally on the show and tell me, here's the reason why we have not actively done marketing. Here's what our plan is in the future, so that your investors get allayed and their concerns get allayed, because once you lose them, it's hard, unless you're the FOMO crowd, to get them back. So I love what their strategy is. I don't like how they communicated it. That's different. And again, as an investor, you should hold them accountable when they don't perform. At the end of the day, I'm looking for performance according to what you promised. So when I see Parabolic and you have these promises and they're not met, however, there's a mitigating circumstance, I'm cool with that, long as I understand it. And my only complaint is you should proactively give that information to me. So your site needs to be updated. Your white paper should be updated. I said the same thing to Boda. It's fine that you say these things are done. Your white paper doesn't say they're done, so I'm going to assume they're not done. And certain things are strategy, so we need to work it as a strategy and revisit it and go over time. And you can come on the show and I will talk this through with you. Hopefully you'll take notes and apply what I'm telling you, because I want to help you. With Libero, though, it's different. And I don't understand this, but you know what? I do, but I'm struggling to wrap my head around why it's so bad. Because it's clear to me that Libero, just because there's a crowd of people, for those that don't know, Titano is a different token out there. Titano was one of the first that did something similar to this. What people don't understand about Libero Financial, all they see is it's copy deep, deep, deep. And they're not listening when I tell them there's nothing wrong with copies. There's nothing wrong with forks, because let's be honest here. Doge is a fork of Bitcoin. SHIB is essentially a copy of Doge with a higher volume, a higher supply. So I can't just trash you because you're a copy of a thing or you're a fork of a thing, because that's a common thing in the business. Who the heck cares? It doesn't matter. But people keep harping on this. They keep harping on it. And I'm finding that many of these are trying to find reasons that Libero's got to be a scam. It's got to be a scam. It's got to be a waste of your time. I'll repeat my saying until I'm blue in the face, at which time I would be purple, given my current skin tone. Just because it's a scam doesn't mean you don't make money. Just because you make money doesn't make it not a scam. My point, again, to repeat for new listeners, it's not about whether it is or isn't a scam up front. It is, are they performing according to what they promised? If they told you X, or did they meet X? Is it getting you to that point? Why is that so important to me? Because it goes to the trust of the development team. I don't trust the development team if they don't perform. SAITAMA made tons of promises, and they have done so for months. If I go back, and all my videos are on YouTube, audio only, and you can revisit my coverage of SAITAMA, and I'm picking on them as an example because they're the worst, most egregious example of failed promises and lies. If you go back, I specifically said, leading up to the event, you better make sure you have that darn wallet available on day one, or the price is going to tank. You can go, if you were in SAITAMA, you know what happened. Exactly what I said happened. They didn't have the wallet. The price tanked. The price spiked significantly and then it tanked. It has not recovered since. I don't care about the incremental up spikes that we've seen over time. None of that matters. You have not gotten back where it should be, which, like I said, we should be now 3 zeros down if we're following the same velocity. It's not there. I said, when this thing launches, you're going to have bugs, but you need to be honest and upfront and don't release this thing until it's working fully. What did they do? They released it to the store in partial form. Then they released a version that nobody could log into. Then they released one that was tied to testnet. Then their response was, well, we did that by purpose. Like they're not, you're causing the tank of the token. So when I say to you guys, what I look for is that you, Barry White, practice what you preach. If you're coming at me and you're telling me that this is what this is, and this is how it's going to work, and this is the return you're going to get, that's what I expect. I'm going to hold you to that. And I expect you to perform and do what you said you were going to do. If you don't, I'm going to call you out on it. Libero so far, even now, even when it's down ever slightly, even now, it had performed the way that they told me. It gave me the returns that it told me it was going to do. It gave me the reflections it told me it was going to do. The sell fee is nothing. It's like $1 and some change. If they were going to cheat me, let's compare this. ID Finance, who I've covered before. If you want to sell your ID Finance, it will charge you $6 in Binance to sell ID Finance. ID freaking Finance. A token that doesn't do anything. It doesn't do anything. I don't care about your ID Craft. I don't care about your ID Verse. The point is, in terms of rewards, I'm not talking reflections because the volume's too low for that to mean anything. It doesn't do anything. And they're willing to charge me $6 in gas for this business with a 20% slippage. And you're telling me I think ID's a legitimate group. I think they don't know what they're doing. But I think they're a legitimate group of people, and I think they're a nice group of people. I just think they're in over their heads. Libero Finance, I've sold for profit 5 times now. Each and every time, that gas has never gone above $1.60. If I go and look at, let's say, I don't know, Anticinu's sell fee is like $3, $4. Anticinu's not a scam, but my point is, the token Libero has not done anything, as far as I can see, to convince me that it's anything other than a grab for profit, which is what they told me. It's a grab for profit. We are here to make you rich. It's not maybe rich because I didn't invest a lot, but I can see how people who did invest more than I did, they're clearly going to be made rich at some point, as long as they follow the edict I keep saying, which is don't FOMO into it, don't YOLO into it, and don't hold. Sell for profit. And it's been behaving the way that they described it. That's the standard I hold them to because I know how different it is in the way they presented it. Second, what I said as far as Titano versus this dude, Titano lacks certain functional fundamentals I put up on Twitter and people still didn't listen. The graphs, it's not close. Titano's is all over the freaking chart. If it was really that big a deal, you would see more consistency. But the problem is a bunch of whales bought into Titano, and Titano lacks the mechanics to offset that damage. Apparently, from what I see, Libero has been able to stabilize to where it does go down, but nowhere near the disruption you see on Titano. How can I explain this? I can only explain it by the mechanics they put in there because they knew about the mistakes of Titano as a fork, and they decided to try to do it right themselves. Why am I going to hold that against them? That doesn't make any sense. As far as I can see, Libero is doing everything the way they're supposed to do for the goal of making people rich, which it seems to be doing. Do I think that at some point they could yank something? It's possible. I think it's unlikely because they're associated with the thorium situation, and thorium has not been a pull, and they've been around forever. Thunder BNB is still a thing. Thunder ADA is still a thing. Thunder Cake still a thing. Multiverse is still a thing. They're things, and they have not yanked and they've not cheated people. And none of them, outside of Thunder BNB, which I think is garbage, but none of them have cheated anybody. And this is part of that network. Like at some point, I think we've lost sight of understanding you got to trust the coin that you're going into. It's not just about, whether it's a copy of a thing. That to me, that's so what? If they did it better, I don't care. I support that you are doing what you said you're going to do. I'm waiting for any evidence. Okay. I had a responder come back and he gave some analysis. And finally, there was something that I could specifically respond to as far as analysis around why people are so against Libero Financial. Here's what this person said. His name is Paolo. If you go on BSCscan and you export the holders, you'll see over 11,000 holders are, quote, fake holders. He didn't do quote, I'm doing that because he can't prove that were airdropped either 1 or 10 Liberos. Let me stop right there. Because I realized that people on YouTube didn't listen to the full podcast, and I encourage you to do. That's cryptotalkradio.net, and you go and listen to the full podcast. But if you did, and you have access to the full podcast list, here's my call to action for you. When you go to Substack, which is the host, or if you're on your own, you should be able to do this. I did coverage on a token called Zeta Reality, XETA. I did that a while ago. And in Zeta Reality, they were one of the first that I noticed that did an airdrop. And I talked to the developers and they said the reason they did it is because it was hard to get awareness. It's hard to get the message out that the token even exists. And so they chose to just simply drop one token to a bunch of people so that they're aware of it. I called out that if you're in Trust Wallet, you wouldn't see it by default, but Coinbase Wallet might show it, MetaMask might show it, etc. And in that episode, I specifically said, I think there's something here, and I think more tokens are going to do this type of airdrop strategy to get awareness out to the people. There's another episode, and it was baked into an omnibus, but I talked about Mega Doge. It did the same thing. Antis Inu did the same thing. So the fact that there was an airdrop of a small number of tokens, I actually even called out. As long as it's not an unrealistic, egregious, silly amount of tokens, it's probably okay, and it's them trying to get your attention. Then what you should do is do the fundamentals. Look at the project. Do analysis of the site. Are the devs communicative? Is there enough in the tokenomics that appeals to you before you give them any money? And if you do, don't YOLO into it. Put a little bit in and see how it performs. Because at the end of the day, it's all about performance. I have never invested in Zeta Reality to this point because as of right now, we're months after the fact and I don't see the performance that I wanted to see from them. However, I'm constantly watching them for the point that I see that some of the fundamentals they talked about are going to be in place. However, they've never yanked. It's still an active project. People are still buying and selling. So no, it's not just about the airdrop. Who cares? They're using that as a marketing strategy. They're using that to try to find holders because it's hard to do it without doing the airdrop. Because as we've seen from projects like Angie, projects like Para Inu, and I'll get to them in a second. This will be a little bit of a long episode. It's hard for them to grow the holder count. We can't compare these newer ones to like a SHIB or a SAITAMA or a Kishu or a Floki who had the benefit of being first starters. They had the benefit of being in proximity to the stupid Elon tweet. It's a different world now. It's harder for them to succeed. It's harder for them to grow. And if you don't have the holder counts, you can't get on exchanges. So I'm not going to hold that against them. He continues. Also, the top 6 wallets didn't pay for their coins and were airdropped literally tens of millions of coins. Okay. Now, if here's your education point. This is all around Libero, by the way. If you're just dialing in, you shouldn't be, but if you are, there's a tool. I covered it. I have coverage. If you go back on the podcast in the past, it's called MarketMove. I cover the token, but I also cover the tool. This tool does an analysis on any token that's on the Binance Smart Chain that you want. And it does a masterful, if you've ever looked at DEX tools or PooCoin, you can imagine MarketMove as a more advanced version of PooCoin from my perspective. When you go to MarketMove and you take any token, so let's say Libero, because it's what's being picked on, it doesn't show in the list by name. What you need to do, because if you're following along, I want to make sure you understand the steps how to do this. What you need to do is you need to get Libero's contract address from their site or from PooCoin. I say go to their site. You know why? Because if you go to their site, right at the top, it straight tells you there's automatic staking, there's automatic compounding, rewards are auto-distributed. It doesn't matter how much you hold, you're still going to get rewards. So it's not like the other garbage where you got to hold millions and millions in order to get rewards. You don't do that. Their burn supply every week. So that's helping maintain the value. It's fully audited. It has CERTIC audit on process. And then there's an anti-whale because you can only sell a certain amount. So there's all these mechanics they built into the thing. That's why I'm told you to go to the website. But right at the top, they give you the contract address. You go to MarketMove in the Market Move search widget, you paste in the contract address. It's going to come back, and when you click on this, it'll give you the chart, and at the bottom you can see the buys and sells, just like with PooCoin. You're going to notice a significant number of buys compared to the number of sells. You will see people selling for profit, but you won't see significant people dumping for profit. You'll just simply see that there's buy activity on this dude. When you look at the graph looks very little different, honestly, from any other token that's out there. They all have the same pattern. There's a spike, then there's a down, and then it balances out as it hits its bottom as everything consolidates. But the real point I want to point out, at the top, if you go to Market Move at the top, you're going to see a tab says Audit next to the Charts tab. We click on Audit. Market Move's tool does an AI-based scrub of the contract and sees if there's anything that it calls out as a concern. I'm not suggesting you take this on its face. What I want you to point down to is there's a section in the middle that talks about holders. And the top 15 holders, if you look at the top 15 holders, how much of the circulating supply do they have? The number one wallet in this thing only holds 2% of the supply. You heard me just talk about SHIB, where the whales are holding 26% of the supply. If you look at the deal here, the top 5 holders only have 6% roughly of the supply. The top 10 holders only have roughly 9% of the supply. It's not close. So just looking at BSCscan tells you one part of the story because you're not understanding compared to the total supply. It's not about circulating. It's about total supply. How much do these have that qualify as whales? It's not close. Now, to be fair, Libero has a much more constrained inventory to it. So the whale consideration now has to look at percentage of supply, not just a number. And I believe this person is only looking at the number and they're freaking out. The other thing I think they're not watching is the liquidity wallet. Their liquidity wallet is locked. It's locked in PancakeSwap. It has 90% of the supply. The next wallet down only has 9% of the supply. It's an unlocked liquidity wallet necessary for the transactions to take place. And then there are other ones that are liquidity wallets, and they're small fractions. And these are probably people that are creating liquidity pairs on their own. Plus, they also have different liquidity types. You can have liquidity on Wrap BNB, BUSD, Thorium. And so what I've been saying, they seem to have solved the problem of a significant loss of value. Is it down? Sure, but it's mitigated by all the different things that they've built in to try to help stabilize value. That's what I said. If you look at the graph, this is consistent with the graph. I trust Market Move's analysis to tell me I can trust the liquidity state. Liquidity is the number one thing. As long as you have liquidity, you can trade that, dude. The rest, it might be slight concerns. And for your investment, you need to make your own decision as to whether it bothers you. I'm saying it doesn't bother me because I understand in the trading strategy of buy in, don't YOLO in, and simply take profit as it makes sense for me. Don't just hold. As long as you hold that strategy and as long as they let you do it, I don't see a problem with it. Who cares? Because they told you making profit is their goal. That's the reason for the token. That's the reason for the tokenomics. So no, I don't think his concerns, he did good due diligence and I applaud him for it. I'm saying that from my coverage, it's irrelevant because ultimately the token has done what they said it was going to do. And his analysis as far as the wallets and the fact they're airdropped, who the hell cares? It doesn't matter. It doesn't affect you. Are you able to take profit? That's what they told you. You will take profit. If you can take profit, who cares about the rest of it? It doesn't matter. If you as an investor say, well, I'm personally bothered anytime there's an airdrop of tokens, let me give you some advice. That whole thing of airdropping, it's only going to happen more and more, number one. Number two, anytime there's a migration, there's airdrops happening. Number three, anytime you're building liquidity, there's airdrops happening. So you're not going to be able to run from that. I'm just telling you, if that's what bothers you because you've been scammed, airdropped, I don't know what to tell you. There are dirty airdrops. They happen. I've called them out as warnings. What I said was, check it out, see if there's anything that's of an overt concern about the project. It's about the project, the devs. Are they communicating? Can you find them? What the heck's going on with this thing? Make sure that you are doing investigation outside of whether it dropped or not is moot, because you might be dropped something because it was a migration you didn't know about. Doesn't mean it's a scam. Means that that was the outlet that they chose as opposed to a claiming model. So I'm not trying to trash his investigation. I applaud that he did the due diligence. I'm saying that what he found, it's a red herring. It doesn't mean anything. From my perspective, it doesn't mean anything. And you're criticizing them for something that's unfair. They used a marketing strategy, and it is what it is. But as far as the token, it's done what they said it would do, and that's what I look at. I can compare all sorts of tokens that I think are great projects. It's just they've not delivered what they said they would do. And in an investor's mind, that's the most important thing. Did they deliver what they said they were going to do? SAITAMA hasn't delivered what they said they were going to do. SHIB has not yet delivered what they said they were going to do. Bone has not delivered what they said they were going to do. Floki has not, they've certainly not delivered what they said they were going to do. Like I can go down the list, and these are credible projects. It's just they haven't delivered what they said they were going to do. You as an investor might be so loyal to them that that doesn't matter to you. I'm simply sharing that from my fundamentals, they are performing the way they said they were going to do. Everything else to me is up to you to make a decision. So what I'm going to do now that I've done this coverage here and I've responded to that comment, this will go on YouTube, this specific separate section, so that we can all hear that same message of how I do analysis. It's deeper than what you see on BSCscan. BSCscan is helpful, but it's also sometimes misleading. You got to go deeper into the nuts and bolts of a thing. And regardless, it's entirely possible, as with any token, even SAITAMA, for all you doubters, it's entirely possible for any token to scam you at any time. And it's not just about yanking liquidity. They could scam you simply by selling major bags as devs. They could scam you by simply not doing any more advertisements. They could scam you by redirecting your tokens from SAITAMA to something else. Like there's all sorts of ways they can rip you off. That's the risk you take. That's the nature of crypto. It's sad, but that's the truth. You know it's the truth. So let's accept it as truth and just make informed decisions by doing our own research and make our own decisions for our own investment strategy.